the flood account that's talked about in other cultures, is not Moses stealing the account from other, I don't know, other
No, he knew
ideas.
about them. Yeah, he knew
Yeah,
about the other accounts. And really, you can kind of see that once you look at it. You're like, yeah, he knew about them. He's correcting them, and he's correcting the record. And
there with Eden too, especially if other cultures like Samaria was talking about the Garden of Eden,
yeah,
um, or the Edenic land at least. And I see like a parallel of like, man, these two concepts must have been well known, and then they were just everybody started, or everybody as in different cultures were noting them in their own way, I guess, and then Moses corrected the record on these actual historical events
yeah.
or places.
Well, a lot of things are handed down word of mouth and in poetry and psalm and things like this. So, from the time of the dispersion of the scattering of the people and mixing, which was about 2334, from that till the time of Abraham, about 2000. So you got 300 years there. And these traditions were changed and just kind of lost and just changed as they do during that time. Enuma Elish, the creation myth for Sumer, one of them. The earliest it could have been written is about 1900 BC, and it probably wasn't really written that early. It's probably more like 1750 or something. But you're talking about the passage of about 500 years, at least, before some of these things are written. And that's just enough time for local corruptions of the stories to occur. Yeah, but Moses knew about this material. He was raised Egyptian royalty. He certainly knew the Egyptian, and he would have had an understanding of Sumerian beliefs. And like I was talking to you before, once Yahweh started speaking with Moses and revealing truth, Moses realized that some of the Babylonian concepts were just closer to the mark than uh, the Egyptian, and so that's why some of the content just leans in favor of Babylonian thought over against Egyptian. Uh, Babylonian immortality was bodily, and that's the truth. Egyptian immortality is in a disembodied state in the spiritual realm. That's not the truth. Stuff like that. Moses had an Egyptian education, so he would have known Egyptian beliefs and Sumerian, Akkadian beliefs, and a lot of other beliefs, really. And the Hebrew people, then, we talked about the beliefs that are in Genesis that were well known. And they include things like the garden, paradise, and reverence for the serpent I mentioned, and the flood, and there's just other things. Longevity of life, just a lot of things. The giants, sons of God coming down and producing the giants and stuff, all this stuff. And we talked about how that was well known. And that's important for people to understand, is that for centuries, really the only history we read was this Hebrew history. It's because it was a religious text, and so it was preserved and it was widespread. And people just kind of held the opinion, the assumption that the Hebrews had unique stories and a unique history and stuff. I don't know why. It was just, I don't know. I don't know quite why. It was just believed that way. And, but with archaeology and stuff, since the 1800s, we've found these stories in the other older traditions. And so scholars today look at it, and scholars today say it was simply borrowed and changed, and the Hebrews pretended like it was theirs, their own. So neither of those views is right, and that's what people need to understand. The old sort of assumption that was held for centuries is, I don't know, a romanticized view of the Bible and stuff like that, you know. But the scholarly conclusions they draw on the evidence are just flung too far the other direction, you know. And you can just kind of prove that from meditating on the text. It's obvious that the Hebrews in Egypt would have known these stories. Moses wasn't telling these people anything new. They knew these, and the people of Egypt knew these different stories, but especially Egyptian. But Moses would have known Sumerian, and people knew each other's beliefs. And also, as they were in the wilderness wandering, they interacted with other groups. And the Pentateuch was really formed to explain that. The different beliefs, the different peoples and their gods, and the regions they occupied, and the stories, all of that. You know, the Pentateuch was really formed to keep all that in mind. But Moses was leading a people around that knew these stories. And I've heard some scholars say, like, Genesis 1 to 11 is a late addition to Genesis, really. And, but that can't be either. It just can't be, because we can tell that the tabernacle is patterned after the garden and was a miniaturized Garden of Eden. So as the Hebrews were wandering through the wilderness, practicing this tabernacle ritual that is a replica of experiencing the presence of God in the garden, all through the wilderness wandering, they were wandering around trying to find, I mean, you know, there's the meaning is a lot deeper than this, but they were wandering around trying to find the spot where this garden was. This garden that they're mimicking with the tabernacle.
Yeah.
And so you have this temporary, mobile, miniaturized garden wandering around in the wilderness. They finally, you know, as the Hebrew history progresses, they finally cross the Jordan and enter the land, the Holy Land. You know where that is? That's Eden, you know, but it's Israel and it's Canaan. And but they enter there, and then finally in Jerusalem, the time comes for Solomon to build a permanent temple. And the reason it's at Jerusalem is because the garden was right there at Jerusalem. Well, this representation of the garden goes back all the way. And so it's all connected.